Today I will be presenting my SRP topic, which was on the effects of inorganic and organic potassium on the weight of watermelons. Before we begin, just a little bit about me. My name is Saunders, and I attend Granite High School. And after I graduate, I plan to attend Longwood University to major in nursing. I chose this project because my family always grows a garden every year. And recently we have not been growing watermelons because every time we attempt to grow them, they are either super small or when they reach the size that we desire, they become rotten and we can no longer eat them. And I want to change this to be able to eat the produce that we grow. I also chose this because watermelons are a popular fruit consumed by humans, and a reliable process needs to be found to improve the quality of the produce that we consume, and so that farmers can rely on the whole harvest and not just a part of it. Potassium is a limiting reagent throughout the soil and crop. This means that potassium needs to be added as a fertilizer to balance the nutrient value of the plant or soil. The nutrient value is the amount of each nutrient that is present in the soil or crop, whichever one is being studied. Potassium also increases the synthesis of protein and the enzyme activation in the plants, which helps to improve the plant development and quality. There was not a lot of articles pertaining to how potassium affects watermelons, which sparked my interest in this topic. Inorganic fertilizers can increase the soil fertility, which can lead to a higher yield and a better quality. One negative effect from inorganic fertilizers is the amount of organic matter. It can decrease the organic matter present in the soil. This leads to the ability to store nutrients to decrease. The ability to store these nutrients are important because this is what the plant relies on to grow and develop. However, organic fertilizers can increase the ability to store nutrients, which again is important for the plant to grow and develop. A negative effect from these organic fertilizers is the slow release of the nutrients. The release of the nutrients is slower because the decomposition takes a longer time. This means that the plant can suffer from a starvation and not grow properly because of this. A type of organic fertilizer is compost tea, and compost tea is a liquid compost. Compost teas have a high amount of growth regulators and phytohormones, which can increase the movement of microorganisms that are beneficial to the plant. And it can also decrease the chance of diseases and improve the soil and crop properties. They also provide micronutrients and bacteria that are needed to achieve the wanted yield, weight, and nutrient value. The question I am aiming to answer with my project is, how does the influence of inorganic and organic potassium affect the weight of watermelons? My research hypothesis was, if inorganic and organic potassium are used, then the organic potassium will produce the heaviest watermelons. And my null hypothesis was, if inorganic and organic potassium are used, then there will be no difference between the harvests. Now let's discuss the variables that I used throughout my project. The independent variable was the added potassium to the plants, whether it be inorganic or organic. The dependent variable was the weight of the harvested watermelons. The control group was the row of watermelons which had no added potassium fertilizer, and the constants were the amount of water and sunlight each plant received, the type of soil each plant was grown in, and also the treatment each plant received, for example, weeding and watering. To begin the procedure, I first gathered my materials, and my main materials that I used were Crimson Sweet watermelons, raw 0050 potassium fertilizer, which is shown in the picture above, ripened bananas, and a weight scale. My family and I then plowed the garden and created 3 rows. I allowed my father to plow the garden because I did not trust myself and because I was not familiar with the tractor. We then planted 42 watermelon plants in total, which was 14 plants per row. The first row had the inorganic potassium fertilizer, the second row had the organic potassium, and the third was our control group. Every week, my family and I then weeded around each plant. I then made my banana compost tea, which was my organic potassium in my project. I made it by first obtaining very ripened and black bananas. I cut them into small pieces and then placed the cut up bananas into a bucket and added 1 cup of water to it and placed it outside for 48 hours, and then it was ready to be used. I mixed my inorganic potassium according to the instructions on the package, which was 1/8 teaspoon of the concentrated fertilizer to 1 gallon of water. I measured 8 fluid ounces of both fertilizers and applied it to each plant that was in that row every 3 weeks twice. I then harvested the plants when they are ready to be picked. And when I harvested them, I put a sticky note on every one to tell me which group it came from and recorded the weight. I then gave every watermelon a number and used a random number generator to choose 10 from each group I would use for my data. And I then conducted my statistical analysis. For my statistical analysis, I conducted a one-way ANOVA test, and I found that at the significance level of 0.05, the null hypothesis was not rejected with a p-value of 0.6. I chose a bar graph to present the sample means from each group. It can be noticed that the control group had the highest mean weight, which was 14.2 pounds, than the 2 experimental groups that had the potassium added to them. The organic potassium produced a mean of 13 pounds, and inorganic potassium produced a mean of 12.4 pounds. However, there was no significant difference between the means. The highest difference was between the control and the inorganic groups, which is 1.8 pounds. And it is important to note that there were no outliers present in the data. To conclude my results, I found that there is not sufficient evidence at a 0.05 significance level to conclude that the type of potassium fertilizer used on crimson sweet watermelons effectively increases the weight of watermelons. But I can conclude that potassium potentially affects the weight of watermelons. With the use of potassium, the weight could possibly decrease. My results led to the assumptions that potassium fertilizers could cause watermelons to not grow to their full potential, meaning that potassium could potentially harm their crops and plants. This could help individuals save their money and not spend it on expensive fertilizers. And this shows that sometimes when individuals buy expensive fertilizers, they do not always work. I believe my experiments showed that sometimes certain fertilizers are not as effective as others, and this helps support that potassium does not positively affect watermelons. According to a study I reviewed during my preliminary research, the higher the dose of potassium that was used could cause a reduction in the weight of the crop, which they saw in their experiment. Even though during my experiment I used the same amount of potassium for each plant, this can support that potassium could cause its effect on watermelons, since the previous study that I mentioned was conducted on muskmelons, which are related to watermelons. My limitations included that the amounts of both fertilizers may have been incorrect. I consulted a local farmer regarding my amounts of fertilizers to utilize, since I conducted my project during the summer of 2022 before I reviewed the full scope of my literature. I may have added too much or too little of the potassium fertilizers, which may have flawed my results. Since I did not test my soil before I conducted this project, the soil may have been potassium rich, and the extra potassium could have damaged the crop instead of helping it, or vice versa. I also believe that my unit of measurement could have been better. I should have measured watermelons with ounces instead of pounds to produce a more accurate weight. My project could help grow the interest on how certain nutrients affect the growth of fruits. More in-depth studies should be conducted on potassium, and this brings up the concern on the amount of potassium. When I reviewed my literature, there were a limited amount of studies regarding the amount of potassium which should be used. More research should be conducted on the nutrient potassium and the amounts of which it should be used. My major takeaway was how much time and effort it takes to keep up a garden. I did not know how much it took to keep one up till now, especially all the weeding and watering it takes. It takes a lot of work, and it was not as easy as I thought. I would first like to thank my teachers here at Gov School, especially Ms. Long, Ms. Kravitz, and Ms. Dillon, with guiding me through my project and helping me whenever I needed help. Thank you Dr. Bocock and Dr. Mark Jones for approving my topic. And thank you to my dad, mom, and sister with helping me undergo and perform my project and never give it up. Thank you all again. Any questions?
I had one, but you answered it about the testing your soil. But as you were going through discussing your limitations, you answered my question, so thank you.
Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Yes, can you describe the process that you use to apply both the organic and the inorganic potassium to the plants?
Yes. So Mr. Taylor asked me how did I measure, could you repeat it one more time?
How did you apply the fertilizer?
Okay. Mr. Taylor asked, how did I apply the fertilizer? So with my inorganic, I applied it by measuring it and then putting it in a watering can to like evenly distribute it like throughout the soil and the crop. And then from my organic potassium, the compost tea was half liquid and it was like also half solid. So I first measured it and then placed it around the soil and crop, and then all of the solid pieces we used a hose to incorporate into the soil. Yes.
Do you know of other sources of organic potassium fertilizer? Did you find any others that may be good to try?
Dr. South asked, did I find any other more organic ways to apply potassium fertilizer? And I think during one of my literature reviews, they used licorice, maybe, and then also potatoes. So those two I did find.